We kick things off on a rather sad note as a boy asks our hero Abel a horrible thing, even though he feels really bad doing it. He asks Abel to leave the team he's been a part of during this entire mission, so our hero feels a bit odd about it. After all, this is rather strange, especially if you consider that Abel was a part of the team when they defeated the Calamity Demon, also known as the Demon Lord of the Dusk. However, his team member tells him that since the boss demon has been beaten, he and the others can take care of all the monsters that are left, since they are not high-level enemies. Abel is no longer needed because he's a grand magician anyway. It makes sense not to require the services of a magic boy on the front line anymore. But Abel can't believe what he's being told, because this feels like some kind of betrayal. This is all so sudden. But then our hero is told that he will never need to bring out his amber eyes again, now that the world is at peace. Of course, Abel should have also realized this at some point, but the shock in his eyes state that he's not ready for this. Anyway, our hero takes a moment to compose himself and then he tells his teammate that he had known this the whole time. This is a bit confusing, so Abel explains to us that demons are the sworn enemies of humans in this fantasy world. However, more than 90% of them have amber eyes that shine like gold. Since Abel also has amber eyes, he can easily be confused for a demon by the common folk. Now that the world is at peace, it's even worse for our hero since all those who have amber eyes will face persecution no matter where they go. Now, we learn that Abel's teammate is called Roy, and he tells our hero that he has prepared a mansion for him where he can hide from the public view. However, Abel is not ready to live that kind of life, so he tells Roy that he will never show his face to his team members ever again. He thinks that Roy is worried about the team's safety due to the presence of his amber eyes. And even though that may be true, Roy feels bad to see Abel like this. He thinks that he has hurt our hero's feelings, so he tries to say sorry for coming across as ungrateful. Of course, Abel knows that it's not Roy's fault because he only has the interests of others on his mind. He even says that the people of the kingdom should not take the blame, and neither should any of his other team members. That's not to say that it's all Abel's fault, but the problem with this world is that it's silly and immature. With no other option in his mind, he decides to pull a rabbit out of the hat and perform a spell that will take him straight into the future. An intense session follows, and then we can see someone opening his eyes. It happens to be our hero, who states that he's been asleep for a while. His body hurts, so he has no idea what's really going on, but soon enough, he can figure that he is inside some kind of dark box. He puts in some effort and is able to lift the lid of the box, after which he realizes that he's been in a coffin this whole time. This may be surprising to us, but Abel is perfectly calm because it's almost as if he had expected this to happen. As per his estimates, he should now be 200 years into the future after the events of his mission against the Demon Lord. He then takes a look at his own hands and tries to make sense of what his body is like. Soon enough, Abel safely identifies that he had succeeded in pulling off the spell he had tried after talking to Roy. It happens to be a reincarnation spell and it has managed to push our hero forward to the same world, but in the future. He is quite proud of himself because there is no one else he knows who can pull off such a powerful spell. Now, Abel recalls how he and his team were able to defeat the Demon Lord 200 years ago. He assumes that since this is the future, then the world must have progressed a lot. As a matter of fact, the spells that would have been considered impossible back in his day should now be common. After all, it's the maturity and knowledge that takes a civilization further ahead. If that is the case, then this world should also be liberal enough to accept Abel's amber eyes. Our hero takes a moment to sense his eyes, as they can express a lot more than simple words. Now, he decides to have a look at what's near the coffin, but he can't find a mirror anywhere, which is strange because he had left one here when he went into the coffin. Maybe it has gotten buried over these 200 years, but the main thing our hero notices is that his body is not the same anymore. Rather, he is now in the form of a child, instead of an overpowered magic boy. However, this was Abel's plan all along because he spent a lot of time and effort into making this body all those years ago. He used the finest materials in the world to create this body, but he also had to go through a lot of experiments. We learn that Abel had the chance to change the appearance of the body, but he was too attached to the way he used to look, so he decided to keep some aspects similar. Either way, he is sure that there is no one in the current world who will be able to recognize him, so it doesn't really matter. Now, our hero hears some noise, so he activates alert mode and pays attention to someone coming towards him. Abel assumes that it could be a cute girl, but then he figures that it's something that is pretending to be a cute girl. He finds it impressive, because humans other than him would not have been able to see through her disguise. Abel prepares himself for a battle, but the problem is that he does not know how well he'll be able to fight in the body of a child. There's no choice, so our hero decides to land the first blow, and then he'll see what happens. However, before he can even fire his first shot, he sees that the girl coming towards him is not just cute, but also curvy. What's even more shocking is that she takes one look at him and immediately identifies him to be our hero. There is an awkward pause for a bit, but then the girl says that the moment is beautiful for her. She seems to be carrying a basket, but she drops it instantly because she has been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Her emotions don't make any sense to Abel, so he tries to figure out why this girl is so happy to see him. The curvy babe keeps saying that she's had to wait for a long time to be able to meet Abel again. But this doesn't ring any bells for him. As a matter of fact, our hero even goes on to say that he never really had a strong connection with any girls back when he was an overpowered magician. He's not proud of this, but he was so distracted by learning magic that his intrusive thoughts never even stood a chance. Anyway, Abel can't seem to recognize this girl, and it makes him confused because he would have surely remembered such a pretty face and curvy body. At this moment, the girl says that demons don't have a lot of friends, and that's when our hero is able to see a younger child's face who resembles this girl. He is suddenly hit with a memory that explains why this girl seems to know who he is. Now, we are taken to a flashback where we see Roy scolding Abel for losing his mind. This is because he is protecting a small child who happens to be a demon girl. Roy tells Abel not to let his kindness get in his way, because at the end of the day, she is still a demon. She is supposed to be the enemy of mankind, but our hero bravely defends her from his own teammate. We learn that after Abel had successfully conquered a demon territory, he had saved a demon girl as well. She happened to be the daughter of the demon lord, so everyone wanted her gone, even though she was perfectly innocent. He felt pity for this demon girl, but isn't able to tell us whether it was because she was too young, or if he became emotional after seeing her amber eyes. We're back to the present now as Abel composes himself once again by saying he saved the girl only on a whim. Anyway, he offers his hand to the demon girl and reveals her name to be Lilith. Abel greets her with a smile and says that it's been a while since they last saw each other. She nods and says that she's glad her hero boy hasn't changed at all even after 200 years. Lilith shows that she has a sense of humor as she corrects herself by saying Abel has actually changed his appearance and is looking younger now. This makes him feel awkward, so there's not much for him to say, especially after Lilith stands up and reveals that she's much taller than him, even though Abel is technically a child right now. The demon girl says that she has always wanted to repay our hero for his kindness, because he was the one who managed to help her survive after her father's demise. She was actually searching for Abel's tombstone for 100 years, after which she finally managed to track down this location. Now, Abel takes a good look at her, but he notices that her eyes are not as blue as he thought they would be. After all, he remembers that Lilith's eyes were of the same color as his own. As he says this, Abel wonders what really defines a person because the color of their eye is usually a reflection of their soul. Basically, soul color is like a method of identifying a person's eye color, so it should be impossible to get rid of it even after reincarnation. None of this makes any sense to our hero, so Lilith eases his nerves by explaining that he was right and she is only wearing colored contact lenses to keep up appearances. Naturally, Abel is sad to hear this, but Lilith explains that if you wear these lenses for long enough, then you'll get used to them. Anyway, he figures half-transparent sheets are good enough to change eye color over here. The concept seems pretty neat and easy, so Abel is shocked that he didn't come up with this idea back then. After all his confusion is cleared, our hero takes a moment to give out a shady laugh because now he is happy with his decision to travel 200 years into the future. He is amazed to see the evolution of mankind, and is also keen to learn the new ways of this world. During his time back in the older days, things used to be really bad when it came to distinguishing people based on their looks and appearances. As a matter of fact, a lot of lives used to get sacrificed to win the wars and the battles, and that too for something as silly as the color of their eyes. Abel laments the situation that he has found himself in because he usually likes to get lucky with girls like this, and is more than happy to act on his intrusive thoughts with them. Rather, it's ironic that something as simple as lenses are enough to solve such conflicts in today's world. Our hero wants to know everything about this new world, and Lilith is more than happy to answer all of his questions. But first, she would like to change places because this dungeon grave is not a suitable area. She suggests going back to her place, and Abel agrees, although with some kind of hesitation. Basically, he's also interested in Lilith's story and wants to know how the creators of this new world have shaped up its existence. Abel decides to up the style factor by putting on a scarf, but this confuses the demon girl, so she asks him if he's wearing some kind of shawl. He clarifies that it's a scarf and is used to protect his body from the cold weather. However, he also realizes that shawl might be what they call a scarf in today's world. Lilith offers her hand to her new master, but it feels weird to him because it's almost as if she is guiding a kid. He has no other choice because he is in a child's body, so he takes the demon girl's hand and is taken out of the dungeon. Abel is amazed to see the pretty visuals outside the tunnel because it's almost as if he has stepped into paradise. Lilith is pleased to be with her master, so she tells him they should head to her house as soon as possible. As they begin their walk, Abel feels the snow on his boots, so he asks Lilith to wait for a bit. She has no problem with it, but our hero feels a bit shy because he doesn't want her to know that he's excited to see the snow. Anyway, now that he has set foot into this new world, it is time for our hero to become the strongest reincarnate. Abel and Lilith now walk into a town area where the demon girl happily announces that they have reached their destination. Abel soaks in the view as he can see a massive mansion. But Lilith's house happens to be a small home right next to the mansion. Abel states that it's a strong contrast. But the demon girl says that she's happy to be living in a simple home. After they step into her house, Lilith also reveals that it would be best not to attract any attention towards Abel, given his history. Our hero agrees with this, because he is still in the body of a child right now. This means that he won't even be able to exert a small fraction of his powers in his current state. The smart choice is to wait for a bit, as he will get his powers back as he continues to grow. Now, Lilith switches on the light to a room, and this shocks Abel because he doesn't see her use any magic to activate it. He looks up to see light bulbs, but has no idea what they are, so he asks his demon girl about them. She explains that these bulbs are among the new ways to operate lighting. She gives our hero a demo by switching the lights on and off just with the flick of a switch. This is the new way to operate in this world, but it looks like Abel has figured out how they work. He says that the bulbs have magic stones inside them, and when the switch is flicked, the light magic is automatically produced. The demon girl is pleased to see how quickly her master was able to figure out the working of the bulbs. But Abel says that he would still prefer to use his own magic to work the lights. He shows off some light powers of his own, but Lilith isn't too surprised by this, because it is exactly how Abel likes to think. This comment takes Abel aback because he doesn't understand what's too appealing about the magic he just showed. After all, lighting up a bulb is the most basic magic that anyone can case, no matter what their eye color may be. It makes him wonder why people have gone through the effort of making so many wasteful items just to operate something that can be done with the simple pointing of a finger. He has no idea what the thought process is behind such things. But then he gets cozy and sinks into the couch. He is clearly tired and he passes out within a second, so Lilith gives him a blanket for cover. Of course, our hero does not understand anything at this point, and it is only after he spends more time with Lilith that he realizes something very important. One fine day, as Abel reads a book about this new world, he is shocked to learn that the range of magicians in this era has decreased by a lot as compared to his own time. The world has actually gone through an unnoticed recession, and the magical powers that used to be so dominant at one time are now barely even existent. This is horrible news for our hero, because it is not at all what he had expected to see in his own land 200 years into the future. As he goes through the magic books in hilarious fashion, he points out that there is a lot of useless text about something that even a child aged 10 would have been able to grasp with ease 200 years ago. Then, he comes across a lesson that explains the wrong magic syntax for its description. Abel wonders if the people of this world even know how to use a magic syntax, and then he slams his own head with frustration. He does understand that the books which were written during his time would have gone through some changes ever since he had vanished from the planet. However, to see such a high level of discrepancy is beyond his understanding. Sure, the culture of the world has improved a lot, but the downsides to magic are far too many for his own liking. The simplest of spells are now becoming automatic, which means that people are becoming lazier every day. Abel wants to learn as much as he can, but he gets tired and complains that his body does not have the stamina needed for lengthy study sessions. Later, as he eats a meal with Lilith, she asks him why he chose to be in a child's body, especially when he knew it would hinder him to such an extent. Our hero explains that while his body may come with its own set of disadvantages, there are also some benefits to it. In this world, the general rule is that you can reach 3 peaks as a human. First, there is the academic peak in your teens. Then there is the physical peak in your 20s, and finally, the magical peak in your 30s. Abel wants to utilize these peaks again to be suited perfectly to the new world. After all, 200 years is a very long time, so there's a lot that he needs to learn while he's here. More than anything else, he actually wants to start his new life as a child because his growth will be more natural that way. The next day, our hero comes across some food that has been wrapped up for him. There's a note left behind by Lilith which says that she has left him some breakfast and lunch. She has to go for work, so she will be back by evening, which is why she wants her master to feel at home and enjoy the food that she has made for him. Abel believes that Lilith wanted to be considerate to him as he was so immersed in his reading, which means that she's a good girl. He takes a bite of the food and wonders what kind of work Lilith might be into. After all, she is a demon girl, so it would be interesting to know what kind of job she might be doing in a town full of humans. Now, our hero yawns and feels sleepy again, so he decides to leave a bookmark in order to take a break for a bit. However, he hears a clicking sound and becomes alert. Someone is in the house, and it can't be Lilith, so Abel prepares himself for a battle. The mysterious person charges towards the reading room and opens the door, so Abel gets ready to confront the intruder. However, to his surprise, he finds a little boy who happily greets him. He asks if Abel is Lilith's brother, but our hero is almost offended to hear that, so he says he's wrong. The boy then asks our hero if he is the demon girl's acquaintance, but Abel is more interested in finding out where he came from. Judging by his looks, it seems that this is just a normal human boy, and his clothes suggest that he comes from wealth. This leads Abel to believe that the boy may have come from the large mansion next door. He still doesn't understand why this boy is here, and that's when he reveals his name to be Ted. He is shown to be rather chirpy as he calls Abel a commoner, and decides to make him his junior. Abel doesn't even respond to his words and gets back to reading his book. After all, there will always be spoiled brats in this world. Ted doesn't like being ignored, so he keeps calling out to our hero, but he also gets his name wrong, so Abel corrects him. Ted continues to bother Abel because he really wants him to become his junior. He even says that they can be brothers, which would suggest that Ted is looking for a friend. Of course, our hero is not here to entertain rich kids, so he tells Ted that he is not interested in whatever he is suggesting. As expected, the brat boy gets upset and laments that the day is not going too well for him. Abel has had just about enough of this, so he shuts his book and gets ready to deal with Ted. He doesn't like to mess with kids, but he has been left with no other choice, so he tells Ted that he's going to give him some life advice. Basically, he warns the brat boy against trying to connect with him because he's not the right company for a child. Our hero then reveals his amber eyes and then looks at Ted to see if he's understood who he's dealing with. The brat boy is shocked to see the eyes, and then he identifies them to be the amber eyes. Abel is glad to hear this, because it means that his plan to scare him has worked. Of course, he isn't done just yet because the amber eyes are also known as demon eyes, which means that they signify the evils of this world. Now that Ted has seen them, he would never even think of forming a connection with our hero. He decides to scare the brat boy some more, so he proudly states that he will not hide his identity anymore. However, he can hear some soft giggling coming from Ted, and then he notices that the brat boy is actually laughing in excitement. He can't believe that he's seeing amber eyes for the first time ever, and he starts to roll on the floor laughing over his discovery. As expected, our hero has no idea why this is happening, and he tries to make sense of whatever it is that Ted is doing here. The brat boy points at Abel and says once again that he has seen amber eyes for the first time in his life. It clearly looks like amber eyes are not seen as demon eyes in this world, so Abel tries to figure what's making Ted go crazy like this. Things haven't really panned out the way our hero would have liked them to, but then he gets some kind of relief. He hears someone else coming towards him, and then we see a young boy entering the room to scold Ted. He tells him that he should not be coming to Lilith's house as and when he pleases because it's impolite to do so. Abel takes a good look at this boy and figures that he must be Ted's older brother, regardless of eye color. We learn that his name is Base as Ted points out to Abel's amber eyes and says that it's his first time seeing a boy with chicken eyes. This takes our hero by surprise, because nobody from his time would ever refer to amber eyes that way. He can't believe that he wasted so much time on the brat boy, especially when he's treating something so serious as if it's some kind of joke. The one he needs to pay attention to is Base, because he looks like a serious boy. It doesn't look like Base is too fond of Abel, and he seems to be a few years older than Ted. However, our hero feels that he will still be wary of him due to his amber eyes now that he's seen them. Now Base reveals that Lilith had told him her talented little brother would be coming to stay with her. Abel strikes a pose to look cool, but his efforts go to waste as Base states that he's disappointed with him. He even says that he kept his expectations a bit too high, and this leaves Abel dumbfounded. He worries that Base might just be as bad as his little brother who keeps saying chicken eyes again and again. Despite the awkward energy in the room, Base is still willing to give Abel some credit because of what Lilith had said to him. Our hero has no idea why he's being treated this way, because as per his knowledge, people with amber eyes are looked at as a serious threat. Soon enough, it strikes him that his eyes may not be seen as the symbol of evil anymore, but rather as a symbol of trash. He can't help himself, so he asks the brothers if amber eyes are considered to be useless in this world. This causes both Ted and Base to change the looks on their faces because it's a rather funny question. As a matter of fact, Ted is unable to control his own laughter as he bursts into tears mocking Abel for being so clueless. The worst part is that Ted is still not able to get our hero's name right, and at this point, it's too late for him to correct the brat boy. Frankly, this is becoming too silly for our hero, so he wants to know what the deal is with amber eyes being called chicken eyes. Ted decides to give it to him raw, and he says that people with amber eyes have a color that matches with chickens. On top of that, this color does not match with any of the elements such as fire, water, wind, or earth. Basically, such people are not even good enough to perform magical crafting or healing magic, so they are considered to be basic. What this implies to Abel is that his amber eyes are nothing more than ordinary eyes to the people of this new world. Our hero is not too pleased to hear this, and Base reads his face, so he tells his brat brother to keep quiet. He has anyway said more than what he should have spoken, and it makes Abel a bit curious. Of course, we need some context, so he decides to give it to us with some exposition. It is true that the powers of the elements are locked for people who have amber eyes. However, they can access them if they go through around 10 years of training. If they are able to get through this phase, then they will be able to control not one, but all of the elements with ease. So, an otherwise basic boy can become the master of magic if he goes through the training needed to become an ultimate magician. It's only a matter of time, which is why people with amber eyes used to be considered so dangerous back in the day. After all, this is the reason why the common folk of the past would call these eyes the symbol of evil. Anyway, there's nothing that can be done at this moment, so Base tries to call out to Abel. He gets his name wrong, but at least says something that sounds nice. Abel corrects him and then Base says sorry for Ted's actions in a very respectful manner. This surprises our hero, so he says it's alright, but then Base tries to get the brat boy to also apologize. As expected, he says no simply because he does not see the point in showing respect to someone with chicken eyes. This annoys Abel, so Base tells his brother not to speak in such a manner. He even says that Abel can live his life in peace even if he does not have the ability to use magic. He might be trying to sound nice, but Abel has realized that even Base doesn't think too much of him due to his amber eyes. The nicer brother tells Abel that he and Ted are in his care now, so he hopes that both our hero and the brat boy can get along with each other. Of course, Abel does not like people like Base because they only put on a show to hide their true faces. Now, Base says that the chosen ones don't like to waste their time on ordinary things, so he tells Ted that he should come home with him and study. The brat boy agrees to this and says bye to Abel but refers to him as chicken eyes. The brothers leave the house, but Abel is left wondering what's wrong with the two of them. They just entered someone else's house and even started making fun of the boy living there for no good reason. It all starts to make sense to our hero when he notices a book which is labeled War History. It's time to study some more, so Abel picks up the book and begins his lesson on the number of battles that have been waged ever since his demise. He learns that in the past 100 years, there has been no kind of war between humans and demons. This means that everyone has been living in peace since that time. Also, since no one is afraid of the demon eyes anymore, there is no reason for fear to be common in this world. There's also the fact that people born with red, black, blue, green, or gray eyes can use their powers to tap into their elements with ease. On the other hand, those with amber eyes will need to struggle a lot and practice as much as they can if they are to create magic right from the beginning. This explains why the levels of the magicians in this world are so low. After all, since the most dangerous eyes in the universe are no longer seen as a threat, but rather a symbol of contempt, Abel has nothing more to say. He rests on his chair and then thinks about Lilith, but not in the way that most boys his age would. He comments that he would not use eye contact lenses for himself, but he can understand why the demon girl is doing so. It was bad enough for her to be mocked during his time, so it makes sense for her to avoid the same treatment now. Abel laments that it truly is difficult to have a normal life if you are like him or Lilith. Anyway, there's no point in crying over spilled milk, so our hero simply opens up another book and starts to learn more about the newer ways. Time passes by, and soon enough, Lilith comes back home looking cheerful as ever. Abel gets a glimpse of what she's wearing and is surprised to see a maid costume. Lilith is looking rather cute as a maid, and her curvy body makes our hero tap into his intrusive thoughts. He wants to know more about Lilith and her job, so she decides to humor him. She explains that in this world, there is a job known as housemaid where she goes to other people's houses and cleans them for a fee. Lilith then strikes a pose and asks her master how he likes her maid costume. If Abel decides to be honest, then he might end up saying some shady things, so he decides to be neutral and says that the maid outfit suits the demon girl. He blushes as he says this, so he tries to cover his face, but Lilith can see right through him, and even she blushes a bit. Now that the fun and games are done with, the demon girl decides to go make dinner, but our hero stops her for a second. Lilith asks him what he wants to know, and he says that he understands why she has to hide the color of her eyes. The demon girl simply nods along and doesn't say much. So Abel reveals he had just assumed that Lilith did not want people to know of her genes. Lilith smiles and begins cooking the food, during which she reveals that there are almost no demons left in this world anymore. After all, it was Abel and his team of heroes who had gone on to defeat the demon lord 200 years ago. With the main boss gone, the rest of the demons were easy to take down, which was how most of the people were able to get rid of them. After the humans came out on top, they were the ones who triumphed while the demons were left in ruins. Peace came back into the world, but at a price, which was that the general power levels of magicians would keep getting lower with each passing year. This is why Abel is seeing such weak magic all over the place, and he realizes that since there is no need to become stronger in this world anymore, people stop training their amber eyes. This is why there is no fear in anyone's hearts when it comes to the amber eyes. As expected, our hero hits the nail on the head, and Lilith confirms it while preparing the meal in the kitchen. Soon enough, dinner is ready to be served, so the demon girl brings the food to the table. Abel wants to see something, so he asks her if she hates humans for what they have done to demons. She says no, so our hero asks if she hates him and his team because they were the ones who triggered the whole thing in the first place. Lilith doesn't say a word, even as Abel blatantly says that he is the reason for people like her to live in secret. It's time for a bride flashback, and we see Abel in his overpowered warrior form taking down the demon lord in an intense battle. This enemy turned out to be Lilith's father, and we can see her peeping in on the fight from the back of a pillar. Now, we come back to the present, where the demon girl confesses that there are times when she feels so bad that she wants to cry. However, she also recalls that Abel was the one who had risked his life to save her from Roy. We learn that our hero had actually gone the extra mile and even found a place for Lilith to live safely. She asks him if he remembers this, which he does, but he also states that he had only left her there for a few weeks. Of course, he is just trying to be humble, but Lilith knows the value of what her master has given to her. She also points out that Abel was the one who taught her how to use magic, and he even helped her understand human rules so that she could blend in with society. She also puts on a shady pose and says that our hero has also helped her learn other things, which suggests that Abel is not as innocent as he may seem. He tries to counter Lilith by saying she's only trying to change the topic, and then he tells her that she was the one who told him a lot of shady things back when they would spend time with each other. The maid girl simply says that every woman has her secrets, and this gets Abel thinking. He knew Lilith as this cute and innocent girl from 200 years ago, but the way she behaves right now is nothing like that. He wonders who she has been spending time with for all these years, and she jokes by saying a woman at the pub taught her a lot of shady things. There's only so much that one can joke about, so Lilith gets serious and tells her master that she is very grateful to him for that he's done for her. The sweetness in her voice really touches our hero, and he continues to blush in front of his maid girl. He can't believe how nice Lilith sounds, so he thanks her for the kind words and laments that he can only hide his face from the maid girl with the book and nothing else. His efforts don't count for much, because he soon finds himself in the bath with Lilith, whose curviness knows no bounds. Of course, it's important to clear things up, so Abel tells us that he was not the one who came up with this idea. It was his maid girl who forced him into the bath with her, so it looks like Abel is more of a victim than the culprit. Lilith continues to act cute, and she says that she could not hold back her love for her master. Our hero is not the kind of boy to give in to his intrusive thoughts so easily, which is why he counters Lilith's advances with sarcasm. He mocks her by saying she has a strange need to act shady and abduct people into the bathroom when she feels love for them. The maid girl just blushes and laughs at his words, but she also understands where he's coming from. Abel wants to make the situation clear to Lilith, so he says out loud that a man and a woman are alone with each other in the bath. One party has her twin peaks exposed while the other party has his elephant out in the open, so he asks Lilith if she knows the implication of such a situation. For a second, the maid girl takes a pause, but then she smiles and presents herself in all her glory. She feels that Abel has an interesting view on things, but she wants him to know one thing, and that is the fact that she is his slave girl. However, since Abel is not in the right kind of body, his words don't come across as manly or dominating. As expected, this makes our hero conscious, so he doesn't say a word. Abel finally lets his intrusive thoughts take over, as he would like his elephant to make good on however long its trunk can get. Of course, he can't take his eyes off Lilith's twin peaks, which are floating in the pool of water. It is true that after 200 years, the maid girl has grown into quite a lovely woman. Back in the day, Abel was more of a guardian to her because he was a young man when he had just met her. However, the situation has reversed now, and he is feeling a strange kind of passion in front of the now adult Lilith. The maid girl doesn't care about anything else, as she's happy that her master has finally seen her as a woman and can have intrusive thoughts about her curvy body. Abel can't fight back anymore, so he activates shady mode and tells Lilith that he will never cower in denial, no matter what the topic may be. She is aware of this philosophy, so she gives Abel some time to prepare himself. A night of passion follows between the two of them, and our hero can say with pride that he has conquered Lilith. He also confesses to us that he had no experience with girls in his previous life, even though he was an elite magic boy. After all, his only interest back then was to become stronger and stronger till he could defeat the demon lord himself. Luckily, he doesn't need to worry about such things now, and he looks at his maid girl who is sleeping in peace. This gets our hero thinking, because maybe this is what a happy life really looks like. He covers up his maid girl so that she doesn't catch a cold, and then he shows a smile on his face. Abel feels that he is going to sleep much better tonight than all his other nights, which is expected because he has finally become a man from a boy. A very peaceful passage follows, and then the sun rises once again. As expected of our hero, he continues to read books because he can't let himself get carried away. It's been a few days now since he has been reincarnated into this world, so his time has been passing by without much of a fuss. There have not been any big incidents yet, so all seems well for now, especially with the routine Abel has made for himself. He gets to sleep next to the cute and curvy Lilith, after which she serves yummy breakfast dressed as a maid. After that, it's time to study, and then Abel takes some rest after eating lunch. After that, he continues with his studies yet again. And then it's supposed to be dinner and sleep. However, as perfect as this routine may sound, there is still one event that cannot be avoided in the afternoon. This event shows itself in its most brutal form as it slams the door open and looks at our hero with a shady smile. It is none other than the brat boy Ted, who has arrived once again to annoy our hero. This seems to be a normal thing for Ted, because he does it every day without fail and doesn't even get tired of it. The brat boy now bothers Abel because he wants his attention, so it can be very disturbing for him. However, our hero seems to know exactly what must be going on in Ted's mind because he is aware of how kids from noble families usually behave. A brat boy normally just wants a playmate of his age to give him company and attention all the time. Abel does his best to fight the need to punch Ted in the face, but soon enough, he slams his book because he knows he won't find peace around the brat boy. He has no obligation to play with Ted, but at the same time, he can't really show off his magic powers either. In order to come up with a solution, Abel uses a spell to strengthen his body and legs so that he can pull off an impossible escape. He quickly jumps on top of the ledge of the window, and this confuses Ted to the point where he worries for our hero. He even tells Abel that he is going to jump from the second floor, so he should wait and think about it. However, our hero simply says sorry to the brat boy and jumps out of the window looking cool. He has the power of magic on his side, so it's not like he is taking a big risk here. Ted can only look on in shock and awe as Abel hops from the window to the roof of the next building. The brat boy is stunned and can't even say a single word. And Abel says sorry because he does not have the time to be bothered by a child at this point. Ted screams in disbelief and asks Abel how he was able to pull off such a movement. However, our hero pays the brat boy no heed and comments that he is starting to get used to his child body. Of course, this is not even close to the kind of power he used to have back in the day, and Abel states that he might have just barely cracked 1% of his true power. However, it does happen to be enough to impress those around him, with Ted being the case here. However, he seems to have done an amazing job and has impressed the brat boy a bit too much. As a matter of fact, Ted becomes so jealous that he decides he's going to do the same thing. The brat boy jumps out of the window like a hero and even strikes a pose to assert dominance. To Abel's surprise, Ted is able to float as he seems to have some kind of physical strengthening magic. Despite this, the brat boy's basics are all wrong, which is why his efforts are nowhere close to our hero's. Abel goes on to explain that proper strengthening magic wraps around a person's body just like armor. The problem with Ted is that he manifests and emits magic a bit too quickly. It's as if the brat boy is just wasting all his magic for no good reason. We can see this come into effect as Ted's magic starts to fail him and the aura fades from his body. The brat boy panics as he's left hanging midair and he starts crying like a little girl. Soon enough, he drops from the air and falls to the ground, but manages to land on a soft spot in the bushes. Abel calmly lands on the ground and states that he did see this coming, so it's not a surprise. He looks at Ted and asks him if he's alright, after which the brat boy emerges from the bushes to show a completely confused face. He asks Abel how he was able to pull this off, especially since he's supposed to be a chicken. The brat boy tries to attack our hero, but Abel manages to dodge him with ease by simply hopping on top of him. He then continues to read the book while Ted falls flat on his face and cries like a little baby. Abel can judge that Ted has a very limited vocabulary, but he admits that he's just a little child. He decides to comfort the brat boy and tells him that he should not worry about such things. However, he then tells Ted that he will be able to use magic properly if he practices religiously for another 20 years. As expected, the brat boy loses all faith after hearing this and he falls to the ground once again. He can't believe that Abel is so cool because he is supposed to be an underling. Our hero calmly says that he doesn't know anything about being an underling, but then he changes his mind and agrees to follow Ted's rules. This makes the brat boy happy and he gives Abel his compliments. But then our hero says that there is one condition. He shows off his scarf and tells Ted that he will agree to become his underling if he is able to steal it from him by sundown. Of course, he has his own intentions in mind, because he wants payback from Ted for disturbing his study time. Basically, he wants a practicing partner to make this time worth his while, which is why he wants to push Ted. This will also help him understand how talented the magicians of this era really are. Ted is more than happy to do this, and he takes a look at our hero's scarf after that. The brat boy says that it will be an easy win for him because he only has to steal the muffler from Abel. Of course, this kind of confidence is hard to come by, so our hero begins the challenge with a countdown. What follows is an intense race where Ted chases after Abel to try and make him his underling. As expected, our hero doesn't even have to try his best to avoid the brat boy, and he even reads his book while he's at it. Naturally, Ted doesn't like this, so he calls Abel a peasant and asks him to wait. This makes our hero realize that even Ted is now aware of how bad his body's strengthening magic is. As a matter of fact, the brat boy hasn't even used an ounce of magic during this chase, and the look on his face suggests that he's about to lose hope. Ted continues to look like a clueless fool, and Abel figures that while he might not have much magic or even any intelligence for that matter, the brat boy does seem to possess a fair amount of stamina. Of course, Ted is unable to figure how Abel is so calm even during such a tense chase. So he asks him the secret to his attitude. Our hero simply states that his training methods are a lot different from those of a basic child. Even 200 years ago, no one was able to keep up with him when he got serious, which means that Abel was the most overpowered magician of them all. At best, only someone with the power level of Roy would have been able to put up a good fight against him, but that was about it. The chase continues for a little longer, but Ted seems to tire down, as can be observed from the way he's panting. Abel decides to stop for a second, and he asks Ted if he wants to stop, despite there still being some time left for the sunset. The brat boy tries to pull off a sneak attack by launching himself at Abel, and he thinks he's got him, but once again, our hero avoids him without even breaking a sweat. He simply says that Ted is way too slow to catch up to him, and he should be nimbler in his approach. By now, the brat boy is flat on the roof and he has no other option left but to give up. He hilariously cries out that he can't take this anymore, so Abel figures he's reached his limit. Ted wants to say something cool, but he passes out before he can complete the sentence. Anyway, Abel is impressed because he didn't think that the brat boy would be able to go any longer than 5 minutes. Instead, Ted tried his best for a full 20 minutes, which means that he's doing some kind of basic training regularly. Our hero wants to go back home, but then something catches his eyes in the window right in front of him. He notices Lilith in her maid costume and she's talking to Base. So Abel wonders what it could be about. Of course, he has the magic to listen in on their chat, so he uses auditory enhancement to close in on the range. Now, we can hear Lilith saying she has mentioned a lot of times before that she can never have a relationship with Base, whom she refers to as her master. This would normally be a shocking moment, but Abel has seen a lot worse during his time, so he maintains his cool and comments that it is a moment of total carnage. At the same time, he also figures that it's normal for Base to behave this way because he is at that age where intrusive thoughts run freely all over the mind and body. It's obvious for him to fall in love with a cute and curvy girl like Lilith, so Base asks her why she doesn't want to be with him. He goes on to ask if there's something that she doesn't like about him, and demands for an answer. Abel is quick to mention that the attitude on display is more than enough to drive any girl away from Base. Now, Lilith explains that it's not about her not liking Base, but rather about her already having someone else in her heart. This comes as a huge shock to the brat bro, and he asks the maid girl if she's talking about Abel. Lilith activates savage mode and tells Base that she will never ever have a relationship with him, so he should just give up on his impossible dream. Base can't control his anger, so he points at Lilith and accuses her of having feelings for her own brother. Of course, she is not related to Abel, so maybe Base is thinking about a typical stepbrother and stepsister relationship. Base tries to act all high and mighty as he walks away from Lilith and even tells her that she should be ashamed of herself. Abel reminds us once again that he is not related to the maid girl in any way, but it would be better and more consistent if he just stuck to that angle. He also feels sorry for Base, because he gets to do shady things to Lilith as many times as he wants, whereas Base can only remain stuck in the friend zone. Anyway, he figures he should just pretend as if he did not see a single thing. And he also realizes that Ted should be able to move his body again by now. That is exactly what happens as the brat boy launches himself in the air and prepares for a finisher move on Abel. He even calls the attack his great Ted kick, but is made to eat humble pie when he misses our hero once again and looks like a total fool while doing so. Ted crashes into the roof once again and starts crying as usual, which doesn't come as a surprise to Abel. Ted wants to know how the boy with amber eyes is able to dodge his kicks, but Abel simply tells him to consider erasing his presence from here first. The brat boy now confesses that he is really at his limit now, and he passes out on the roof. Abel figures that Ted has finally run out of magic, and comments that it may have been too much for his first day. He hopes that the brat boy has learned his lesson now, and will stop coming to bother him at him. However, kids are known to be annoying and persistent, which is the exact same case with Ted. A few days later, we see both Abel and Ted on the roof again, with the brat boy trying yet another attack on him. Ted feels that he will get a clean strike now because Abel is wide open, but then he gets a whack on his head and nurses his injury. Our hero tells the brat boy that he should stop announcing his attacks because this is not some manga comic, but real life. Ted argues that he almost got Abel this time, but he counters by saying that is a completely false statement. Anyway, Ted seems to enjoy these sessions, so they become a daily part of his routine with Abel now. One thing that our hero notices is that the brat boy has finally gotten his name right. He is unable to believe this, so he asks Ted for clarity, but the brat boy simply takes this as a chance to gloat. He says that it should be normal for him to finally get his name, especially after training with him every day for such a long time. Also, Ted hasn't given up on the hopes of making Abel his underling, so our hero says it would be better if he forgot his name if that's the case. The brat boy gets ready for action once again, and our hero confesses that he has gotten a bit better over the past few days. For better or worse, Ted is a simply boy, regardless of his noble birth, and at the same time, he does have talent. Our hero feels that body-strengthening magic is a good match for the brat boy because it requires a strong natural instinct. Now, Ted prepares to snatch Abel's scarf and announces it once again as he charges at our hero. He gets close, but Abel only lets this happen by chance, and then he dodges Ted once again. He trips the brat boy from below and also adds the fact that Ted's improvement is nothing great and is only worth mentioning for a second. The problem, though, is that the area in front of Ted is completely open, so he has nowhere to land but the ground. Abel panics because the brat boy lands on the pavement and injures his leg, as can be seen by his writhing in pain. Ted cries that it hurts a lot, and Abel reaches the scene to check up on him. He notices that even though the brat boy was able to land somehow, he seems to have broken his leg. He says it will be fine if it is only a fracture because it is a lot easier for magic to repair broken bones than it is to fix internal organs. Our hero confesses that he's not too good with recovery magic, especially in his current body, but something like this should be fine for him to fix. Abel is about to get the job done, but then we hear a loud scream from behind, and it happens to be Base calling out to his brother. He rushes to the scene and pushes our hero back while saying he will use his recovery magic on the brat boy. Now, Base heals Ted with his own healing magic while Abel watches on and observes that it is an elemental spell. He admits that he might not have given Base the credit that he deserves, so he decides to reassess him. Now, Abel tells us that there are 5 great eyes for each element, namely red eyes for fire, blue eyes for water, green eyes for wind, black eyes for creation, and gray eyes for support. Of course, amber eyes are good to use all of these elements, and Abel wonders if Base would have been able to use his powers if he didn't have gray eyes. Surprisingly, Base is not able to go a good job and he struggles with the healing magic. Abel has to take his words back because what the brat bro is doing is rather laughable. Ted is still in pain and he continues to cry, so Base asks if he's alright. He tells the brat boy that he needs to endure this pain for a bit if he is to get better, but soon enough, Ted passes out from the injury. Now that he has fainted, the best thing to do would be to take him to a medical room for treatment. Abel says this to Base and tells him to hurry because he's already done the first aid. However, the brat bro wants to confront our hero because of what he did earlier. He says that he saw what Abel had pulled with Ted when he swept his leg during their training session. However, our hero is not in the mood to play silly games, so he tells Base that he is wasting time by accusing him of such a crime. He then calls out the brat bro for not paying attention to what was happening before the fall. Ted had tried to get up and then he attacked Abel, which was why he tapped him with his foot. However, Base is not listening to the logic here and instead focuses on the fact that Abel did not refer to Ted as his master. The brat bro tries to act all high and mighty in front of our hero, but it is of no use as Abel simply looks at him with disapproval. He asks Base if he's really going to create a fuss over such a small issue, but the brat bro insists that Abel is a common man and Ted is a noble boy. Basically, what he's trying to say is that no matter how young Ted may be, he is still the second son of the Langobard family, which means that he should get this respect by default. Once again, Abel points out that fact that it doesn't matter whether he's a commoner or a noble man, because at the end of the day, Ted is the priority and he needs to be taken to a calmer place. People start to gather around the area due to the fuss that Base has created. But the brat bro doesn't seem to care about that either. He scolds Abel once again and even makes fun of his eyes by calling him an inferior bumpkin. He strikes a threatening pose and tells Abel that he will make him pay for his disrespectful tone towards a noble family. Our hero could not care less about what Base has to say, probably because he has realized that the brat bro is trying to vent out his frustration over Lilith rejecting him for Abel. Now, Base pulls out his sword and accuses Abel of bringing disregard to the honor of his family. He states that he will not be lenient against a fellow like him, and then he openly challenges Abel to a duel to test out his manhood. It doesn't look like Base is going to back down from this, and the people who have gathered around the area start to chat with each other. This is not good news for our hero, because he wants to keep a low profile for now. Things are going to get very complex for him soon, so he needs to come up with a subtle solution. He tells Base that he doesn't really have a reason to fight him, so where do they go from here? This only angers the brat bro further, so he scolds Abel and tells him to stop messing around. He continues to harp on the fact that our hero has made fun of a noble, so Abel realizes that he has probably made matters worse now. He plans out a sequence because he has to treat Ted's wound as well. If this is the case, then it doesn't really make sense for him to accept the duel. After all, he will need to defeat Base as quickly as possible to avoid a scene, so our hero sighs in annoyance. With no other option in sight, Abel accepts the duel because he wants to check out the power levels of the noblemen of this era. He needed a sample of the skills in this modern world anyway, so he's getting a 2-in-1 deal here. Meanwhile, we can see a doctor and a maid girl trying to treat Ted, who is in deep pain. Abel hopes to finish this fight as quickly as he can because if he doesn't use anything flashy, then the crowd will not pay much attention to him. He looks at the brat boy and asks him to hold on for a little bit so that he can take care of him. Now, it's time to go by the rules, so Base explains the one to make his enemy declare his defeat first is the one who will win the duel. Now, the brat bro explains that he is older than Abel, so he will take on a handicap to make things fair between them. However, Abel mocks him yet again by saying he doesn't have time for a lecture, and a handicap will not be needed for him to win this match. He wants to end this quickly, and Base takes offense to it because he feels insulted by it. Of course, his ego is hurt badly, so he prepares to lash out at Abel and he promises not to hold back. Base strikes a battle pose and tells our hero that he will regret making fun of him for the rest of his life. Abel watches his technique to see if Base can live up to his talk. And then we see the brat bro unleashing a wind effigy move. It looks impressive from the way Base launches it, but Abel can dodge it with his eyes closed. He notices that the power of the attack is mid in itself, but the real focus point is that Base has a fast conjuring speed for his spells. He wonders how this could be happening. And then he looks at the brat bro's sword. Maybe this is the reason why Base is able to launch his attacks with ease. And he notices Abel looking at his sword. He asks our hero if this is the first time that he's seeing a regalia sword because he clearly seems distracted by it. Abel has not heard of this name before, so he stands there looking clueless, which Base misinterprets as subjugation. He states that our hero must be very ignorant if he has never even heard about a regalia sword despite being of a certain age. The brat bro continues by saying Abel must have come from some backwater country to be so clueless about something so popular. Now, Base decides to educate our hero about the regalia sword instead of giving himself a handicap. He explains that this sword has been created as a supports weapon made by magic. Due to the nature of the sword, Base is extremely fast, which proves Abel's theory to be correct. As he says this, Base proudly declares that he can conjure magic faster than most people and he launches yet another attack on Abel to prove his point. Normally, the brat bro would expect this to be his finisher move, but our hero is not going to go down so easily. He dodges the attack without any issues and looks very unconcerned as he continues to evade Base's attacks. Abel now uses his analytical eyes ability and takes a look at his enemy's sword. He tries to figure where the source of the energy is coming from, and he soon realizes that it was set in advance. Basically, the regalia sword is just a tool that allows the instant use of magical attacks by pouring magic power into it. Now, Base unleashes another wind attack, and this time, Abel chooses not to avoid it. Rather, he simply smacks it into two and calls the whole thing foolish, much to the brat bro's shock and awe. Abel has been able to solve the mystery without breaking a sweat, but Base can only stand there in confusion because his most powerful magic has been broken by bare hands. Abel tells us that the regalia sword might be one of the reasons for the power levels of magicians being so low in today's world. After all, it's very convenient to use and this could have pushed the modern magicians to rely on it to lower their own efforts. Our hero thinks back to his past days where magicians would need to build their own sources of magic before they could launch any attacks. This would make fighting a lot harder, but would also make the magicians much stronger. Also, toys such as the regalia sword would never be acceptable 200 years ago, because the environment was not so relaxed. This is because there were demons back then, which meant that everyone needed to be on top of their game. In the modern world, there are no such enemies, and with peace dominating the scene, even basic magic is more than enough to gain popularity. As a result of this, magic tools like the regalia sword have robbed magicians of the thinking mind, and everyone has become a slave to the toys of the modern regime. Base is still speechless, and he wonders if he just saw immense power from a boy with amber eyes. On the other hand, Abel says that he can't believe this is what the brat bro likes to call magic. He thought the wind attack was a flying balloon and this only rubs salt on Base's wound. The brat bro gets triggered and unleashes all his power in one blow because he wants to teach his enemy a lesson. Of course, even this has no effect on our hero, so now it's time for him to spring into action and stop evading the wind effigy attacks. After all, Base did just help Abel with his investigation, so it's only fair for him to reward the brat bro. He decides to do that by showing him undiluted magic, and then he forms a power ball while also having a deadly look in his amber eyes. He decides to give Base a taste of his own medicine by unleashing a wind effigy move of his own, but this one is a lot more powerful than anything Base can hope to achieve. The sheer magnitude of this blow is so amazing that the brat bro can only stand there helpless and speechless. Abel makes sure not to land a direct hit, and instead destroys the ground on which Base is standing. The shock waves from the attack are more than enough to send the brat bro flying away, and he is easily defeated without even having to say a word. Our hero is anyway not in his best form, and even then, he decided to use flashy effects to make Base realize the difference in their power levels. He also lowered the strength of the attack in order to ensure his opponent would only sustain a few minor injuries and nothing more. It's time to gloat in front of the brat bro, so Abel asks him how he liked it. He asks Base if he feels like giving up now, but the brat bro becomes angry upon hearing this. He can't believe that a kid with amber eyes was able to defeat him, and that too, with such immense power. It's almost as if the whole thing is unfair, so he asks Abel who he really is. Before our hero can answer that question, a cute maid girl shows up from nowhere and lands a direct knee shot on Base. The attack is good enough to send the brat bro rolling away, and then she composes herself in front of Abel. It's none other than Lilith who strikes a pose in front of her master to impress him. He asks her what she's doing here, and she replies by saying she's taking care of the garbage that is rolling nearby. This is funny for sure, but Abel points out that Lilith is a housemaid working in Base's family's house. Her kicking his face might be a problem to her employers, and even Base asks Lilith what the meaning of her actions may be. However, the curvy babe turns things around by activating demon mode in front of Base. She tells him to shut up and never speak to her again because he has insulted her master and her lover boy. She warns the brat bro not to try insulting Abel any further, otherwise she will never forgive him. Her speech is more than enough to make Base tremble in fear. And then she says sorry to her master for not being around to supervise the scene. Abel tells her it's all good, and she can forgive Base for acting like a fool earlier. After all, what the brat bro said was not anything intense when compared to the insults our hero used to hear 200 years ago. However, Lilith is not going to let this slide, and she tells Base that he should consider himself lucky because of Abel being a tolerant boy. She's going to forget about Base's sins for now, but he should thank Abel for his kindness. The look on the brat bro's face suggests that he wants to say something along the lines of him being a noble, so he does not need to say sorry for anything. Rather, it is the other way around for brats like him. But Abel tells us that Base is not actually saying these things out loud. He can read his thoughts, and what he can also sense is that if he says something so blatant, then he will have to deal with Lilith in demon mode. For all we know, she might even take his life, so he decides to keep his mouth shut for now. The brat bro is forced to eat humble pie, and he bows to our hero while crying like a baby. After Base admits his defeat, Ted is quickly taken to a doctor in a medical home and is treated for his injuries. An hour passes by, and the process is completed, but the doctor tells Ted that it will take at least 6 months for his leg to heal. A boy like Ted would be itching to go out and play, but he must be patient for his own sake now. Abel is seen listening in on the chat from behind the window as he is in spy mode. The doctor walks away, and then Abel comments on how 6 months is a very long time for such a small injury. He feels that the wound isn't even that serious, despite the extra symptoms that came in due to Base delaying the treatment to satisfy his own ego. From the looks of it, even the power levels of medical magicians has fallen a lot in this era, and Abel is not at all happy with what he's seeing. It's time to show what he's really made of, so he sneaks into the room and Ted hears the creaking of the window. He is surprised to see Abel in front of him, but our hero just asks him about his injury. The brat boy wants to act tough, so he fakes a laugh and tells Abel that it's only a scratch, but the pain is so much for him that he falls asleep right after saying this. Our hero can't believe what he's seeing, and he can't sense even a shred of intellect coming from Ted's dull brain. He also can't wait for 6 months to see Ted fully healed, so he unleashes his own healing skills now that the doctor has left the room. Abel uses the technique deconstruction known as little healing, and merges it with 2 other aspects called reconstruction magic and recovery magic. After all of these forms are combined, Abel unleashes the ultimate application of strengthening healing power. A surge of energy fills up the room as our hero spreads the healing magic across Ted's body. It doesn't take long for him to get done with the job, and he thinks this should be enough for the brat boy to be up in no time. Abel admits that while Ted's injuries have nothing to do with him, he does feel bad because he does not want to lose his sparring partner. As he leaves the room, he tells Ted that he needs him to heal as soon as possible because he wants the brat boy to continue working hard for him. As he jumps out of the window, Abel also says sorry to Ted for healing him so abruptly as he is short on time. We can see the brat boy sleeping with a smile on his face, which suggests that he has indeed been healed from his injuries. The next day, we are treated to a rather hilarious sight as we see Base's father coming to Abel and apologizing for what had happened with his son. He also forces Base to bow his head in front of our hero, even though it doesn't look like he wants to do so. Abel is a bit clueless, but also completely calm, just as is expected from him. He wants to know how such a scene has presented itself in front of him, and then we see the father saying sorry once again for his son's stupid actions. We learn that Base's father's name is Evans, and he had made sure to come visit our hero the very morning after the whole duel fiasco. Base tries to resist his father's palms, but it's of no use as he is the junior in this chat between the adults. Despite this, Base says that he does not need to say sorry to Abel because he is a commoner with amber eyes. Our hero looks at the brat bro with doubt in his eyes, because he clearly does not have any intention of apologizing. As expected, Evans whacks his son on the head, but then he reminds his father that Abel is the only younger brother of their maid girl Lilith. Of course, this is just a lie because the axe our hero and his maid girl commit can only apply to stepbrother and stepsister. Either way, Evans scolds his son with contempt and calls him a fool in front of Abel. He then makes it very clear to Base that they are not the ones who have hired Lilith, but it is rather Lilith who is hiring them. The brat bro is totally shocked to hear this, and his now bald head starts to sweat from confusion. Of course, this makes perfect sense to Abel, because he was wondering why a high-class demon girl like Lilith would serve a noble family with weaklings like Base. He figures that the maid girl might have something on Evans and his family, which is why they are working in this manner together. He then reasons with himself and states that there are many obstacles that get in the way of a demon living with a human, let alone Lilith, who is the daughter of the demon lord. One of the lessons that have been taught to everyone, though, is that the power of a noble should always be made use of, no matter what the method may be. Both Evans and Base bow down on the floor and are almost lying in front of Abel as the father begs our hero not to take his life or punish his son too severely. This is not the sight that Abel was expecting to see, so he wants to know what it is that Lilith has on Evans. He then tells the father that he can raise his head because he is not angry with them in the first place. Evans is glad to hear this and he thanks his master for such kindness, but bows down even more aggressively to offer his utmost gratitude. The only thing that Abel gets from this is that the family does not know how to listen to orders. Base once again tries to resist his father and asks him why he's being so soft in front of a commoner. However, he is told to keep his mouth shut, and then he goes back to his mansion to rot like a sore loser. Nighttime arrives, so the brat bro decides to have a chat with his dad. It's a bit too late for him to be doing this, so Evans asks him why he's here at such a time. Base simply says that he wants to be blunt with his father, and he goes ahead to ask if he is planning on getting rid of Lilith and Abel. This is a very stupid question, and Evans instantly says no with a snarl in his voice. Base is not ready to accept this, and he continues to ask his father why he's being so nice to common folk. That's when Evans reveals that their village has a lot of disadvantages when it comes to the geography of their location. He feels that his people can do well if they all follow the maid girl's advice, so he considers Lilith to be his benefactor. This means that Evans will never go back on his word and will always honor the maid girl's requests. Base acts rude and mocks his father for being soft once again as he feels that they can rule over the village well enough even if they don't rely on Lilith. He doesn't see any problems in the way they are as of now, so he asks for the differences in the maid's advice. Evans is not in the mood to argue with an arrogant fool, so he tells Base that he will take care of it. The commotion from this argument wakes up Ted, who sleepily walks into the room and yawns as he calls out to his family members. He wants to know what's going on because he could hear their voices from the hallway. Of course, the most surprising thing here is that Ted can walk, which should not be the case as per what the doctor had said. Base knows this, so he asks Ted if he realizes what he is doing right now. The brat boy says that he can walk pretty easily, and on top of that, he can also run and play just fine. This shocks Base for sure, but Evans is still composed, which means he has an idea of what Lilith is capable of. The brat bro wants to know this secret, and he also asks his dad why noble men and he and him have to bow their heads down to a maid girl like Lilith. He requests his father to spill the beans, but he refuses to do so, and this is when we learn that Evans knows about Lilith being a demon girl who is hiding amongst the humans. He actually wants to reveal this to both his sons, but he doesn't know if this is the right time to do so. He simply rejects Base's request, and it enrages him even further to the point where he makes an absurd request. He asks Evans to enroll him into the Arsulia Magic Academy, which makes the father very worried. Basically, this academy is a prestigious one which has educated a lot of elite magicians in the past. It will take at least 5 years to graduate from this academy, but it should be worth the effort, judging by the results. Evans doesn't think this is a good idea, so he tells Base that he can't allow such a thing to happen. The brat bro has to remain in this village and study as the Lord's heir, just as he had promised. However, Base is not ready to yield just yet, and he tells his dad that he wants to learn the most powerful magic in the world. He wants to become stronger and sharper than he already is. so that he can cut down his enemies with none of them escaping his sight. He wants to wield the most fearsome magic in this world, but Evans worries that Base is becoming a little crazy. Basically, the brat bro wants to become so overpowered that neither the common folk nor the noble men will be able to defeat him. There is a lot of evil intent in his words, so Ted goes up to his big brother and tells him that he does not need to be this way. However, Base has lost all sense of logic as he pushes his own brother away and tells him that he is the shame of his own family. He goes on to blame Ted for what happened between him and Abel, so Evans has to hold down Base in order to keep him in check. The brat bro blames the brat boy for getting too close to the common folk, and this is why he feels that he has ruined his nobility. This is definitely not how the future lord of the village should be talking, so Evans fears that Base will never be able to take over the title that he currently owns. Thinking that a change of space might help his son, Evans tells Base that he will recommend him to the Arsulia Magic Academy. He reasons that it would be best for his son to gain some experience outside of this country so that he can get an idea of what the real world looks like. However, Base only looks at his dad with an evil smile on his face and says that he knew he would say something like this. With that, Base excuses himself and leaves the room, but Evans wonders where he went wrong with his son's upbringing. Ted simply hopes that his big brother is okay, so it looks like the brat boy is already more caring than the brat bro. Evans notices this, and is pleased to see how calm Ted is despite what just happened between him and his brother. He admits that he does not know his sons as well as he should, because the seemingly naughty Ted is already at a much higher level of emotional maturity than his supposedly noble brother. Seeing this as a message from fate, Evans decides to tell Ted the truth behind his relationship with Lilith. The brat boy is surprised to see his dad like this, but he's in for a lot more surprises when Evans reveals that he was once saved by the maid girl a long time ago. We go to a flashback where Evans had gone hunting in the forest one fine day. Suddenly, he got attacked by a demon and all hope seemed lost until Lilith came along and saved him from the demon. This was, of course, when he was much younger, so he decided to team up with the maid girl who ended up helping him in many ways. To Evans, Lilith was both a good teacher and a good neighbor whom he could count on. After spending enough time together, Evans had asked Lilith why she was helping him so much, and that was when she made her big revelation. Basically, Lilith was doing all of this for Evans so that she could live in a place that gave her peace. She needed to be in this place till the big day would arrive when an important person to her would wake up. Of course, she was referring to our hero Abel here, but since it was the first time that Evans was hearing it, he had no idea what she meant by this. However, now it all makes sense to him, especially after the arrival of her master. The reason for Evans being kept alive from that day all the way till now was for Lilith to be able to greet Abel and live with him without any worries. We're back to the present now, so Evans tells Ted that he can never be like Base under any situation. He needs to get along with Lilith and Abel because that will be important towards the future of this world. Ted tries to shake off the serious nature of this chat by saying his dad doesn't need to stress on this too much. After all, he still believes that Abel will become his underling at some point in time, or so he hopes. Ted has a nice smile on his face as he tells his father that our hero is an important friend to him. At the same time though, we see Base walking away with the same evil smile on his face, suggesting that he is up to no good. Anyway, we move to the next day and we see Ted happily breaking into Lilith's house with a cheerful energy. He announces his arrival and calls Abel his teacher in a rather cheerful mode. The brat boy is counting on our hero to continue with his training, but Abel points out that he needs to open the door quietly when he can see that he is reading a book. However, Ted asks him to ignore that and continue with his training just like they were doing before he hilariously fell off the roof. Only one day has passed by since the roof incident, and we can see that Ted is still as lively as ever in front of our hero. He wants to know the secret to the magic power he pulled off in front of him because he wants to get the hang of it himself. Of course, Abel doesn't know how to feel about Ted calling him his teacher because the mentor relationship had started out of the blue. It becomes annoying for our hero, but at the end of the day, Ted is a child with a lot of energy. Abel looks at the brat boy's leg and can see that it is healed completely, so he asks him if he's feeling just like before. Of course, Ted is not going to admit the truth, so he says that such a wound is nothing but a scratch for a master like him. Abel calls him out for the fake bravado because he remembers clearly how much Ted was crying when he actually got the injury. The past is the past, so our hero figures that he and Ted should get back to their signature game of tag again. It's been a while since this has happened, so Ted's face brightens up and he says yes to the idea. He goes on to proclaim that he will easily defeat his teacher today, but Abel simply gives him a calm look and says that it's good to be confident. He then tells Ted that he can use the body-strengthening magic that was taught the previous day because he feels that the brat boy should be able to use it well now. Ted instantly says yes because he knows that he can pull it off with ease. This goes on for a long time. Normally, a standard boy would get upset over this and teach the useless fools a lesson, but Abel is not like that, and he only comments that the quality of students in this era is also poor, just as he had expected. At the same time though, he knows that the best magicians are capable of hiding their powers, so he should still be alert during his time here. Meanwhile, the foolish boys continue to talk about how a boy with inferior eyes was selected to their school. One of them says that Abel was recommended by a family which is known to send large donations to the school. This is obviously a silly accusation, but even then, the other student says that bribery will not get our hero anywhere because he will still fail the entrance exams. The first student says that Abel will probably try to bribe the examiner, and nonsense like this continues to spout out of their mouths. Ted is visibly baffled to see how stupid some kids can be, and Abel simply says that people like to run their mouths for no good reason. Now, the brat boy defends his teacher by lashing out at the stupid boys and telling them that they can't judge a person from the color of their eyes. Abel is surprised to see that a brat boy like Ted is raising his voice for him, and then he is told not to worry about such idle talk. Our hero realizes that in every era, there is some kind of bias towards those who have amber eyes. Even the most knowledgeable and elite people of the kingdom still happen to have a discriminatory mentality. Now, a cute girl steps into the picture and scolds the nobles for their attitude. She says that they should be ashamed of themselves for speaking in such a basic manner, and then she presents herself in all her glory. This girl is cute and curvy, so our hero checks her out instantly. He notices that she has red eyes and a crest on her ribbon which possibly reminds him of something from his past. Now, the curvy babe walks up to one of the stupid boys and tells him that he is simply spreading gossip about a random commoner who has just arrived to their esteemed academy. This is not how a true noble would behave, so the boy is a total disgrace to them. He has no idea who this girl is, so he demands to know her name first. She herself to be Eliza, who has come here to graduate after 5 years and become a great female magician who will go on to create history. She might be cute and curvy, but the boys prefer their ego, so they tell her to watch the tone with which she is speaking to them. They even threaten her by saying they are going to teach her some manners, so things might get ugly from here. Ted tells his teacher that they should help Eliza, but Abel says no because she already has it all figured out. The brat boy doesn't get what he means by this, but our hero knows that Eliza's power levels are good enough to get her through this. The curvy babe pulls out her sword and unleashes a fierce slash attack on the boys before they can even blink their eyes. They are both shocked to see how skilled Eliza is, and are left speechless as she orders them to get out of her sight. The boys show their true colors and run away from the scene after saying sorry to Eliza in a hilarious manner. Abel is impressed with the curvy babe's sword skills, so he wants to thank her for her help. Of course, he never needed it in the first place, but he wants to be polite and show his appreciation. However, when he goes to offer his hand, Eliza smacks it away and calls him a lowly commoner. She tells him that he has no business putting his shady hands on her body, but our hero doesn't get why she's being so silly. He tells Eliza that she did just help him out, so her attitude doesn't make sense. The curvy babe states that she just doesn't like to see whiny babies getting bullied, and she also tells him that she did not give him the permission to speak with her. Abel is disappointed because it looks like this academy is only filled with idiots, but he chooses not to escalate the issue. Now, Eliza tells our hero that if he wants to get her attention, then he will have to be more disciplined than anyone else in the school. After all, she only likes to be with strong men, but that just comes off as wrong on a lot of levels. Ted wonders what's wrong with her, and Abel says that he has no idea, but at the same time, he admits that Eliza has a very strong aura as compared to the other magicians of this era, so she might even live up to his own standards. On top of that, our hero feels like he has met the curvy babe somewhere before, but can't recall when. It's time to get started with the entrance exam, and we can see both Ted and Abel seated together in the classroom. The brat boy doesn't look like he's prepared for the test, and our hero is nonchalant as usual. Now, he explains to us that the entrance exam of Arsulia is split into 2 kinds of tests. One is a writing test and the other is a skill test, both of which are graded out of 100 marks. So, the total and perfect score for this kind of exam is 200 points. The writing test is far too easy for Abel, so he goes through the general education section, followed by reading, maths, and writing tests. Even when he comes to the magic language section, he feels that a perfect score is the basic expectation, because the quality of magic in this era is anyway too low. Magic engineering, on the other hand, is a bit tougher than the other sections, but to our hero it is simple as counting till 3. In the middle of all this, we can see that Ted is struggling with each and every question that has come his way. Now, it's time for the biggest problem in the paper, and it has to do with the concept of magic creating a human soul. Abel is happy to see this question, because it is of a totally different standard and has popped up out of nowhere. Since the difficulty level of this problem is so high, even the smartest kids in the room start to sweat. Abel knows that the only reason for this question is to prevent anyone from getting the perfect score. He can even sense the smirk on the face of the person who included this question. However, he is on a completely different level because the theorem being requested in this answer was made by none other than he himself. 200 years ago, when Abel was still a child less than 10 years old, the trend of human body modification was going viral and magicians everywhere were searching for a way to create a human soul. It was then discovered that a popular magician had claimed countless lives by using humans as experiments in his quest to create a human soul. Not only was this a silly idea, but also a social problem because it is impossible to create a soul with magic. In order to end this madness, Abel had published a thesis known as the Decay theorem, which proved the fact that magic could not be used to create a human soul. He had done this anonymously, but it got the job done because his logic was flawless. Of course, he managed to use some of the information he gained through that research to be able to reincarnate himself into the future. Also, he came up with the name Decay simply because it was what his neighbors used to call their dog. However, now that he thinks about it, the theorem that he had published all those years ago was incomplete and, in his opinion, quite useless. He wonders if he should correct the theorem right now, and he is actually ashamed of what he did 200 years ago, even though he was only a child at the time. Ted is fighting a losing battle in the meanwhile, as his face is worse than that of a slain soldier. Anyway, the boys get done with their writing test and head out of the exam room. As expected, the Arsulia Magic Academy is quite huge. Abel and Ted are now in an open area which has been designed to test range magic, as can be seen from the dartboards. Now, a curvy sensei shows up and tells the students to pick up a regalia weapon that matches the color of their eyes. This is to assess their skills for the practical test, so everyone picks up a weapon. However, the one made for amber eyes is useless, and our hero laments the lack of awareness even in such an esteemed academy. Ted asks Abel if he will use the regalia for red eyes, but then they get annoyed by some other students who tell our hero not to pick up a random regalia even if the one he has is horrible. The curvy sensei calls for silence and goes on to explain the rules of the test, which are actually quite simple. All that needs to be done is for the students to shoot at their targets with magic. The setup is supposed to be really sturdy, so the students are encouraged to unleash their full potential. Abel figures that by using a regalia with the same source set in advance, it becomes easier to assess the abilities of the student. This means that a high amount of inner magical power backed by the skill to release this power is the requirement for this test. The curvy sensei asks who wants to go first, so Ted raises his hands with excitement and asks to give his powers a shot. She agrees to let him proceed, and Ted is very happy to do it, but Abel wonders if the brat boy will be okay. After all, he may have trained him for a while, but Ted's skills as a magician are only half decent. His main concern is that the brat boy should not be humiliated in front of such a large crowd. But Ted looks confident enough. He preps himself, and then the curvy sensei gives him the go-ahead. Ted charges at his target and unleashes his fireball attack, which is supposed to be excellent. But Abel is horrified to see that he's only managed to release a small ball of fire. It's a terrible display and hilarious as well. But Abel realizes that Ted is a low-level magician who has used an unfamiliar regalia, so the outcome is natural. As he observes the fireball crashing into the target, he notices that the dartboards are actually equipped with dark matter ore to absorb magic. This means that the targets will not break even with powerful magic. However, the real shock comes when the curvy sensei congratulates Ted for being such an amazing magician. This is not even a joke, as she says that Ted is too good to be taking the general exams. The brat boy doesn't know how to react to this, so he simply stands there with a look of confusion. What's more is that this performance gets all the other students talking about Ted and his family. They even start looking at the brat boy as their top competitor and make him their benchmark to do better. Hearing this is probably making our hero question everything about the new era, as he feels the level of magic is even worse than he had imagined. If this wasn't bad enough, a veteran examiner shows up with his pipe and strikes a pose to look cool. He even calls Ted a monster and says that he has been able to witness the birth of a genius magician. Apparently, this is something that can happen only once in every 100 years, so Abel questions the abilities of the examiner and wonders if he is daydreaming right now. The other students try their hand at the test as well, and they try their best, but it is a laughable situation. They miss their marks and aren't even able to reach the target spots. So Abel laments the fact that the students of this world are extremely weak. If they can't even pull off their spells with a regalia, then someone like Base is actually impressive as per these standards. It's our hero's turn now, so the curvy sensei asks him if he even wants to take the test. Abel takes this as an insult because even the examiner is not able to realize the importance of amber eyes. He's worried about the future, but agrees to go ahead with the test, so everyone watches on with anticipation. They want to know if a boy with amber eyes can actually use magic. But our hero is going to blow their minds. He realizes that there is no rule against source modification, so he decides to make the most of his regalia even though he doesn't really need to use a toy. Of course, he doesn't want to make much of a scene, so he uses a low-level fireball attack. Even this is shown to be an overpowered move and he unleashes his wrath for everyone to see. To his own shock and surprise, the dartboard is totally decimated, which makes the curvy sensei and all the students panic. Our hero states that they should not have called these boards unbreakable, because he's done so with zero effort. He reasons that the school might be using low-quality dark matter ore for the student exams. After all, high-quality ores would not melt so easily against a basic-level attack. Meanwhile, the other students can't believe that a boy with amber eyes is able to use god-level magic, especially because his kind is supposed to be weak. Of course, Ted is overjoyed to see this, so he cheers his teacher on, even though Abel says that the brat boy should try a little harder on his own spells. As the students continue to talk about how our hero was able to pull this off, he is relieved that he has at least gone against the misconception of amber eyes being weak. What's next for Abel and Ted? Will our hero end up making Eliza his next slave girl? Like, share, and subscribe if you liked this video. Hit the bell icon to get notified when I upload part 2. See you soon.